Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening. Sorry, didn't mean to try to elicit too much. We gather here this evening to celebrate the 88th birthday of Yuko Hayashi. And she is here. She is the Old West Organ Society's founding executive director, longtime chair of the organ department and faculty member at the New England Conservatory of Music, our mentor, friend, advisor, and a strong, inspirationally visionary woman whose global musical influence is unprecedented. On behalf of the Old West Organ Society and the Board of Directors, I welcome you to the Old West Church. My name is David Eaton, and I also have the privilege of serving on the board. And if you would take a look at the first, second, third, and fourth pages in your program, there are pertinent announcements that I'm not going to go over right now. Following the program, those of you who wish to would like to wish Yuko a happy birthday, you may stand in front of that camera and give her a video message saying happy birthday, and Goran will be more than happy to assist you with that. Thank you to this evening's speakers, performers, who have arranged their schedules to be here. And thanks to all of you for being here. As I personally reflect on this celebration, Yuko, along with this instrument, have shaped me in ways that continue to influence my thinking in everyday life and as a musician. I will always be grateful for having had the opportunity of studying with Yuko and at the New England Conservatory of Music and here on this extraordinary instrument. As I've communicated with the numerous NEC alums, by the way, can you raise your hand if you studied with Yuko or worked with Yuko? Yes, fabulous. So happy that all of you are here. Through most of the process of putting this celebration together, it's been my pleasure to hear a number of colorful Yuko anecdotes. I suspect these tales of Yuko might be considered fake news, maybe even from today's perspective. And I'm most certain that the material would not be appropriate to be included in a professional journal article or even a student dissertation, but hopefully we'll hear more of those stories from the upcoming speakers. Inspired by this transcendent instrument, Yuko envisioned the Old West Organ Society to be an organization whose activities would provide us with musical food for our hearts, minds, bodies, and souls, a tangible and profound antidote at a time in its conception, and even more so today. For this and for so much more, we can forever be grateful for the vision and foresight that Yuko has provided for us. The Old West Organ Society continues to present quality performances, interesting and pertinent educational opportunities, along with ongoing maintenance and promotion of this landmark instrument. Your support of our activities, begun by the work of our founding director, continues to be just the kind of solace we all need in today's world. Through the next hour, we celebrate quirky, mystical, magical qualities that were and are Yuko as we hear humorous moments, deeply felt sentiments, and heartfelt music making. Please join me in welcoming Gregory Crowell, along with all of tonight's speakers and performers.
Good evening. I first met Yuko in this room in the fall of 1974. I was 16 years old, and I had come to audition for her on the advice of my organ teacher at the time, Rakich, who was the organist of the Lutheran Church in Acton, where I lived. I played the toccata and adagio. Somehow I had the wisdom to know that the fugue was beyond me, although not the wisdom to know that the toccata and the adagio were also beyond me. I had only been playing the organ for 2 years. Miss Hayashi, as I called her, was the soul of grace, and maybe some of you know that when she first came to this country, she went by the name Grace Hayashi. I vividly remember the post-audition tea at the Sun Tui restaurant across the street, which is now the Tip Tap or something. We affectionately called it the Hak Tui restaurant. And we shared a tea. My Southern Belle mother, Mrs. Dubiel, who was a native of Frankfurt and had been a student of Helmut Walcher, and Miss Hayashi and me. The three of them remained amazingly calm, even after a fight broke out in the kitchen between the chef and the sous chef. I remember seeing the swinging door to the kitchen open as one of the chefs was wielding a meat cleaver, all while my mother was pouring tea, and Miss Hayashi said, "How lovely." Miss Hayashi gave me 2 lessons before turning me over to Donald Dame, who taught at the preparatory division at NEC, and with whom I studied until I entered NEC as a freshman in 1976. I remember those lessons with Miss Hayashi as if they had happened yesterday. At my first lesson, she asked me who I liked to listen to. I said Albert Schweitzer because I had read his book and I thought it was really interesting, and E. Power Biggs because I had been to the Buschreisinger Museum and I liked that organ. She simply nodded and she said, "I think Biggs is on the right road." That's all I needed. I went home, I listened to the recordings that Schweitzer made and Biggs made. It had never entered my mind that there might be a real difference between them, but I started to notice a difference. I could hear how one was making a different kind of music at the organ than the other one. At my next lesson, I can still see it today, Miss Hayashi mimicked playing a recorder, and she began talking about how a recorder can play only one note at a time, and maybe organists should take care of each note the way a recorder does. Another seed was planted. During my years at NEC, I was astonished at how different one student played from another. We seemed to be developing our own personalities. It was really only after I left NEC that I began to understand how this was happening. Unlike any other teacher I had had before or since, Miss Hayashi always began her comments by pointing out something in the music, then drawing a conclusion from that observation about how to play it. I can remember many instances, but I'll cite one. It was Brahms' Chorale Prelude on Schmücke dich, o liebe Seele. It perplexed me. All those intertwined 16th notes, they were a thicket to my fingers. But she had me play the first phrase of the chorale over and over until I had it memorized. And then she had me play the alto line. And she said, "Look for something familiar." I found the melody lurking in all of those lines, and I began to shape meaningful phrases. She didn't tell me how to do it. She led me to the way to find out how to do it on my own. During these lessons, the justification always came before the direction. The why preceded the what, and one could not make performance decisions based on style alone. At some point towards the end of my senior year at NEC, I noticed that I started to think of her not as Miss Hayashi, but as Yuko. We, in fact, spent a lot of time together. I particularly remember sitting on the roof of her building in Belmont, watching the super blood moon rise over the horizon, or sitting in her car for hours, talking about music, organs, and organists. I gradually came to realize that she never told me it was okay to call her Yuko, to call her by her first name, but that she simply had let me come to know and to feel that I was moving beyond the point of being just a student. To the Japanese, gifts are a precious commodity, given with ritual formality and touching sincerity. Our friendship continued for decades, including trips to Italy and Japan, my turning pages for her when she made her Bach recording here at Old West, lengthy telephone calls that always ended when the conversation seemed to settle to a natural resting point, after which Yuko would simply hang up without having said goodbye. Yuko's gift of friendship was not finished, just like those telephone calls. It was wrapped up neatly in a package, ready to be opened whenever I needed it. This, it turns out, is every time I sit down to play the organ.
What an honor to participate in this celebration of this great woman, performer, teacher, and friend, Yuko Hayashi. My first experience being in the presence of Yuko was listening to her tackle two big warhorses of the organ repertoire at Woolsey Hall on the campus of Yale University. I watched as this petite woman emerged onto stage and took a seat at the giant console where she played the Liszt Odd Nos and the Franck Grand Pièce Symphonique. It was after this performance that I mistakenly thought Yuko was best known for her romantic performances. Little did I know that the true magic occurred in the world of early music. Fast forward, I found myself at the conservatory in the fall of 1981 as one of the lucky students of Yuko's, and in my second year had the added pleasure of being her assistant in the organ department. It was Yuko who taught me to play the organ with my ears and not from a rule book of perpetual practice without thought. It was Yuko who taught me the importance of the space between the notes and not simply stringing the notes together thoughtlessly. It was Yuko who taught me that I could learn as much from the organ I was playing as the practice I had done in preparation for the performance. I'm not sure if the real learning took place in the practice room or in the car rides, having just picked up Yuko from the airport after a tour and hearing of her many exciting adventures. Those adventures including her recovering from jet lag, upon arrival to play the concert, the discovery of the organ she would be performing on, which often included hand gestures to describe the action and the feeling of the keyboard. And then dropping her home on Tappan Street, often having some tea and bringing her up to speed on organ department stuff. Or the many conversations over sushi and sake, or the post-organ gatherings each week here at Old West after we played as students for each other. One of the most memorable experiences for me occurred after graduating from NEC. It was the summer of 1984, and Yuko organized a trip to Italy. It was my first trip to Europe and the first experience with instruments dating back centuries. There were 6 of us traveling with Yuko, 4 of which are present today. Helen, Kevin, Michael, and myself. That adds up to 4, yes. It was an experience of a lifetime, and it's where we all had a chance to see Yuko in action. On many occasions, we would be visiting a church, and Yuko would sit and play, or conduct a master class spontaneously with Umberto Pineschi, where we found Yuko translating Italian into English, mouth covered, of course. It is this combination of Yuko's charming and strong personality that clearly infused her enthusiasm for music, teaching, and the giving of herself to her students over these many years. There's hardly a day that goes by that I don't hear her voice in my head as I'm playing the organ. It's ironic for me that I've spent my entire professional career playing big electro-pneumatic organs, action organs, in huge rooms until recently. It is now 30 plus years later that I find myself listening to Yuko teaching me anew as I play on a mechanical action instrument in a more intimate setting. The lessons learned were well taught as they continue to be a strong and present voice. I truly believe this is the gift of a great teacher. I believe this is the gift that Yuko has given each of us. I celebrate her and honor her and her many amazing achievements as we toast her on her 88th birthday. To Yuko.
First off, I never studied with Yuko. So my connection with her is quite different from a fair number of you here tonight. It was my lot in life to take over the Old West Organ Society when she finally stepped down from leading this organization that she had founded and had steered for so many years. After such a long and deep connection to the society, it took her a while to realize that she was no longer running it. However, it was very good to see her coming to events that she hadn't planned, and I think she enjoyed not having to be responsible for all of the details anymore. Her choosing me was an outgrowth of my having served as the managing director, the clerk, and an occasional fundraiser for the society over many years. My job was to show that the society could continue, and I am delighted to see that it has survived even me. We talk often, and have already spoken tonight, about the profound effects a teacher can have on her students. It is more accurately the case that Yuko has had an impact on just about any organist who has ever lived in the Boston area. My mom, who retired from her organ job just a few years ago at the young age of 74 years, clearly remembers meeting Yuko here a long time ago after a recital that Yuko played here. When my mom went upstairs to offer her congratulations, Yuko introduced herself as Grace. I will never know this for sure, but Yuko probably understood that my mom's being a Roman Catholic meant that a Christian name would make a deeper connection. Mom still treasures the courtesy that Grace demonstrated, even after having played a recital. Whatever name she used, Yuko was the quiet, observant powerhouse that helped the students see what to do next and helped them figure out how to do it. When she and John Gillock were leading the Boston Organ Academy about a dozen years ago here, I got to watch her at work. As a teacher myself, I learned immensely about paying the right kind of attention to the student, and I did so simply by watching what Yuko said and did. She was even teaching the teachers. This is a mark of excellence. None of the things that she did was easy. We remember her with not one but two prodigious talents, both performing and teaching. We often forget, and it is good to remember it at this time, that she came here from Japan at a time when being Japanese was not necessarily welcome, and that she was a single woman on her own in mid-20th century America. It was hard work for her to do what she did. And yet she shared all her prodigious gifts with elegance and grace. The work that she has done has shown us all how to play, how to teach, how to share her beloved Opus 55 with the world. These are the gifts from Yuko that I shall treasure. Thank you.
As you might imagine, it was Charlie Fisk who introduced me to Yuko Hayashi after I had started my apprenticeship with him in 1973. But it wasn't until after Charlie's death that I had a lot of interaction with Yuko. And it was after her retirement from NEC that I got to spend a great amount of time with her. Yuko was fond of telling me that she really had no control over the direction of her life. It was the strong men in her life that pushed her into doing what she did, and she readily blamed them for how her life turned out. But don't get me wrong, she never expressed concern or sorrow about how her life has gone. In her room are a number of photographs, and all of the strong men in her life are there. The first being her father, who pushed her to study in the United States. She didn't want to leave Japan and was absolutely miserable when she found herself at school in Missouri, a place where you could only get dead fish to eat. That was the motivation to seek out another school which would be near the ocean and where there would be fresh fish. Boston looked pretty good. So came NEC. Her first teacher at NEC was George Faxon, another strong man in her life. She credited him with teaching her how to push pistons and challenged her to play Leo Sauerber's Pageant, music which was a stretch for her small hands. But we all know Yuko's determination, and she mastered the piece. When Faxon moved to Boston University, she told Yuko not to follow him. He had taught her all that she could learn from him. She never quite knew how to interpret that statement, but she did follow his advice. Then came Donald Willing, who Yuko describes as a tall, handsome man from Texas. Willing introduced Yuko to tractor instruments. Mind you, she had mostly played on reed organs and electronic instruments in Japan. There weren't many pipe organs in Japan during her youth. Willing opened a whole new door for Yuko, one that caught her imagination. The control over the music that mechanical action afforded was clearly a distinct advantage. Yuko told me how she became chair of the organ department at NEC. Gunther Schuller had asked her if she would accept the position, and she said no. She didn't think that she deserved or was ready for the responsibility, so she refused the invitation. However, a few weeks later at a faculty gathering, Yuko was shocked when Schuller announced that Yuko Hayashi was the new chair of the organ department. Surrounded by her peers, she couldn't say no. Shortly after completing Opus 55, Charles Fisk discussed with the minister who should be the organist at Old West, succeeding James Busby. They decided that Yuko Hayashi was the right person and asked her to meet with them at the church. Even though it was a non-paying job, Yuko could not say no to Charlie when asked to take the position. The rest has become history as she settled into the job, arranged ties between Old West and NEC, and started the Old West Organ Society. Without Yuko, Opus 55 would most likely have had a hard time surviving. I'm certainly not one of the strong men in Yuko's life. It's more the other way around. Somewhere along the line, she learned how to become a strong woman. She was always challenging me. I use the word challenge, she would use the word push. After a few years with Opus 55, Yuko dreamed of Charlie Fisk building an organ in Japan, but the timing was no good. She had opened the door to a possibility in the early 1980s, but because of Charlie's health, that project was never realized. Then after his death, she was not able to promote Fisk until his successors had had time to prove themselves. As we were finishing the Lay family organ in Dallas, she had an opportunity to recommend us when a new organ was being considered in Yokohama. Finally, the door reopened toward realizing her dream of a Charlie organ in Japan. To help make this happen, Yuko arranged for me to give a talk about organ building to a congress of the Japan Organist Society in 1993 in Tokyo and Yokohama. Yuko knew that Japanese people needed to see my face, and to have a chance to personally size me up before they would consider buying an organ from a builder who had not previously built in Japan. Many organists attended this Congress, and I renewed friendships with a number of her former students from NEC. I learned from all there the great respect Yuko was held in Japan, and I learned that they called her Yuko Sensei. Sensei being a title reserved for doctors and respected teachers. Fisk finished Opus 110 5 years later, and resident organist Hatsumi Miura named the organ Lucy. Lucy derived from the Latin word lux, or light. Hatsumi proclaimed Lucy as a new light on the organ scene in Japan. Since then, Fisk has built 2 other instruments in Japan, each garnering further respect for Fisk and for Yuko Hayashi. After she retired from NEC, Yuko spent several summers in Gloucester, and we had the opportunity to get together often. During these times, she often spoke of wishing to return to Japan. At one point, I suggested that we go together, since I go very regularly to Japan. She liked the idea. A former NEC student of Yuko's, Tomoko Akatsu Miyamoto, and I started investigating possible living situations in the Yokohama area, working with Yuko's brother. We reserved a place for Yuko to check out when she arrived with me in Japan. Using frequent flyer miles, I booked Yuko a seat in first class for a flight on September 2010. She admitted she's never flown first class before, and I wanted to go along. I was booked on the same plane, but well behind her. When we started planning a party, a going away party, which we had in Gloucester a month before our departure. Yuko came up with the invitation list, and about 50 people attended to wish her a good journey and farewell. We had a grand time that day, but the day before we were to leave for Japan, I talked with Yuko, and she said she wasn't ready to go. She wasn't finished with her work here in Boston. She would go with me another time. Well, that day has never come, and I still find people who are surprised to learn that she is still with us in New England. Since then, I've continued my plans to retire in Japan, and that date now comes at the end of this month. Michael Kraft has taken my responsibilities as Fisk's president, and I am busy cleaning up 44 years of accumulation. In my most recent substantive conversations with Yuko, she would ask every time, "What are you going to do in Japan?" My response of wanting to be able to relax after a lifetime of stress and hard work seemed not to register with her. Each time I would see her, she would ask the same question, often adding, "You need a mission." At first, I attributed the repeated questions to dementia, but finally it dawned on me that I really am not ready for pasture, and indeed, I needed a mission. That has come to focus for me this past year, and I'm excited about sharing my organ building talents in a new country, a place where I can get back to basics and not have the responsibility of keeping a company running. I can simply be a missionary for the pipe organ and its music. I have no doubt that I'll be busy. I rather imagine that many of you here have been challenged by Yuko over the years with the same question at some point in your relation with her. If not, I think it's appropriate at this time to ask yourself, what is my mission? Arigatou gozaimasu, Yuko Sensei. Thank you very much for being part of my life.
I'm very honored to say a few words on behalf of all of us in celebration of Yuko on your birthday. I first knew Yuko as a teenager when I began organ studies at the age of 15, and that was nearly 40 years ago. All I brought was a great deal of enthusiasm for the organ, and Lord knows I needed a teacher, and Lord knows I found a great one. I want to thank everybody who's spoken before me for touching so many important parts of Yuko's story and Yuko's contributions. I'm reminded of a conversation I had with Yuko where we were discussing a great teacher who I was going to study with after my years at New England Conservatory, Klaus Bolt. And she described Klaus as a tree. Klaus is a tree. And that's a metaphor that was very potent at that time and has become more so in the intervening years. As I think about the image of a tree and its roots and its cycles of growth and all the ways that it nurtures that which is around it, I couldn't think of a better description of Yuko. Yuko, you are also a tree. I think about your roots in Japan, growing up by the sea, in a household where there was music, where there were hymns and psalms, where there was a church community, and where your love for music was encouraged and nurtured by your parents. And I think of your astonishing growth as a musician, as you came to the United States, as you became a new teacher, and through all the intervening years, as you lived through cycles of exploration and development and growth as an artist yourself and as a great teacher to us all. And I think about how a tree, when you look into the inside, you can see all the cycles of how that tree grew and how amazing it is that it then grows out and nourishes that which grows around it. Yuko, you always encouraged us to do our very best, and you always gave your very best when you worked with us. We can do no less as we carry on the wonderful work that you accomplished at New England Conservatory and here at the Old West Church. I can't thank you enough, and I wish you joy on your birthday and in every day to come. Thank you, Yuko Sensei.
I once observed to Yuko that the fate of the Christian church was tied to the organ. I should say the other way around. But that the Christian church was yielding to pop music orientation in entertainment drenched America. So I said to him, how in this setting can organ music, which you know and love, ever survive? Yuko replied in less than a nanosecond, "It will survive," she said, "because it is the truth." Wow. Bless you.
Hi, Yuko. My name's Joe Scholastico. I met you once at a Methuen recital several years ago, and your former teacher, Richard Bunbury, introduced me to you. And I first want to say happy birthday to you, and happy birthday from Richard and from another one of your students, James David Christie, who couldn't be here. But I want to thank you tonight for the gift of both of them in my life. And again, happy birthday. Thank you.